History's echo is never silent. It hums in the background of every empire, every decision, every confident declaration that this time will be different. But it never really is. The arrogance of familiar patterns is humanity's oldest habit, and perhaps America's most dangerous one right now. For generations, superpowers have fallen not because they lacked resources, intellect, or allies, but because they believed history had somehow retired, that the old rules of rise and fall no longer applied to them. Yet history, patient and amused, always returns to collect the debt of overconfidence. America today stands at that same crossroads where other great powers once stood. Britain before the industrial shifts, Rome before its political decay, and even the Soviet Union before its own ideological implosion. The pattern is easy to spot in hindsight, but invisible when you're inside it. The world's most powerful nation begins to act not from necessity but from nostalgia. It starts believing that dominance is a right, not a responsibility. And when that happens, decisions stop being strategic and start becoming symbolic. The next big American mistake won't come from a sudden collapse or a dramatic failure. It will come quietly, disguised as routine. It will come in the form of assuming the world still revolves around the same axis, that others still need validation, that the old diplomatic levers still pull the same weight. The arrogance of the familiar tells America that the world will continue to play by its rules, even as those rules grow irrelevant. But the rhythm has changed, and India is dancing to a new tempo. India has seen this pattern before, not as a bystander but as a student of history. It has watched powers rise on innovation and fall on arrogance. The British Empire once thought its hold on trade and governance was eternal. The Soviet Union thought control was strength. America now risks believing that influence is ownership. And it is that very assumption that creates opportunity for the patient, the prepared, and the underestimated. Every empire imagines it is exceptional until it meets the quiet builder, the one who learns from others' mistakes rather than repeats them. India is becoming that builder, not by shouting its power, but by constructing it brick by brick, policy by policy, generation by generation. When America underestimates the shifts happening outside its gaze, the technological self-reliance, the new trade corridors, the regional partnerships no longer needing approval, it makes the same mistake every empire before it is made, believing that time stands still when they are in control. Arrogance doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like indifference, the assumption that others cannot catch up. But in today's world, indifference is the most dangerous illusion. As America continues to defend an old order, India is quietly defining a new one built not on imitation, but innovation, not on dominance, but resilience. And when history's echo grows loud enough, it won't sound like America's victory song, it will sound like India's arrival. The great irony of power is that it often stumbles not from weakness, but from the illusion of control. America's story, for all its triumphs and innovations, is inching toward a chapter where ambition begins to outgrow understanding, where the hunger to shape the world exceeds the world's willingness to be shaped. This is the miscalculation of overreach. It happens when influence turns into interference, when strategy turns into spectacle, and when the world's most powerful nation begins to act as though leadership and domination are the same thing. Overreach is not born from malice, it's born from momentum. After decades of leading global systems, military, economic, and cultural, America has come to see intervention as instinct. But the 21st century is no longer built on obedience, it's built on options. Nations that once depended on the United States for technology, trade, and protection now have alternatives. The global order is fragmenting into multiple centers of gravity, and yet Washington still moves as if it alone defines the world's orbit. The mistake is subtle but deadly. It's not about doing too little or too much, it's about misunderstanding the terrain. Every empire faces the temptation to extend its reach just one more time, to prove it still matters, that its decline is a rumor. But in doing so, it stretches its credibility thinner than its capability. America's next big mistake may come in this form, overplaying its hand in regions and industries that no longer depend on its lead. Whether it's attempting to micromanage global tech regulations, shape Asia's security architecture, or dictate trade norms, the assumption that others will follow out of habit is misplaced. India, in particular, is not following, it's recalibrating. India understands overreach because it has spent decades on the receiving end of it. It has seen how superpowers confuse control with cooperation. But now, with a maturing economy, expanding digital ecosystem, and a generation confident in self-definition, India is no longer a participant in someone else's narrative. It's becoming the narrator. America's miscalculation lies in believing that every rising power must eventually orbit its influence. Yet India's trajectory is not an orbit, it's an ascent. When a superpower tries to hold too many levers, it begins to lose grip on the essential ones. America's overreach in technology and geopolitics could be the very spark that accelerates India's self-reliance. Restrictions on semiconductor exports, attempts to monopolize AI development, or political lectures disguised as diplomacy, all these pressures push India to innovate faster, build smarter, and trust itself more deeply. The harder the push, the greater the propulsion. Overreach also blinds vision. It prevents adaptation by creating a false sense of invincibility. America risks repeating the fate of past powers who couldn't see that control is not the same as relevance. The global stage is no longer a chessboard with one grandmaster. It's an ecosystem where adaptability wins over authority. India is playing the long game, investing in silent strength rather than loud symbolism. And when America overextends its reach, it won't just lose grip, it will hand India the very space it needs to become unstoppable. Patience has never looked so powerful. In a world addicted to speed, where nations rush to prove dominance through instant reactions and headline-making decisions, India's calm stands out as both a mystery and a masterstroke. Strategic patience is often misunderstood as passivity, but India has turned it into a form of silent strength, an art of waiting without wasting, of moving without announcing. This patience is not born of hesitation. It is born of perspective. It's the understanding that power built slowly lasts longer than influence gained suddenly. For decades, India has been underestimated precisely because it didn't rush to fit into someone else's timeline. While others sprinted for quick geopolitical wins, India observed the race, studied the terrain, and built its own track. What the world sees as delay, India recognizes as preparation. This strategic patience is evident in every dimension. From foreign policy to technology, from economic reforms to military modernization, it's a deliberate tempo designed not to impress the moment but to define the era that follows. America, by contrast, often moves with a sense of urgency that borders on anxiety. The constant need to act now has become part of its political DNA, a belief that influence is only real if it is visible. But India's approach could not be more different. It is not trying to dominate headlines, it's trying to dominate outcomes. The true genius of strategic patience is that it allows flexibility to observe mistakes others make in haste and to respond with precision instead of panic. Take foreign policy as an example. India has learned to balance relationships that most nations would find impossible to maintain. It speaks with Washington, trades with Moscow, collaborates with Tokyo, and negotiates with Beijing, not out of confusion, but out of calculation. This is diplomacy as a chessboard, not a battlefield. America's next big mistake, an overreaction, a rushed alliance, or a poorly timed sanction, will likely contrast sharply with India's quiet composure. That contrast will not just reveal who is more powerful, it will reveal who is more prepared. Even in economics, India's patience is beginning to pay dividends. Instead of rushing into full globalization or closing itself off, it has built a hybrid model, open to opportunity, but cautious about dependency. It nurtured its own digital infrastructure before letting global giants dominate it. It strengthened domestic manufacturing before chasing flashy trade deals. This slow burn is now transforming into a steady flame of resilience, one that no external shock can easily extinguish. Strategic patience is also psychological. India understands the value of timing, that moments of restraint can achieve more than decades of reaction. By choosing when not to act, India often shifts the balance of power without firing a shot or delivering a speech. When America tries to pressure, India listens. When America overreaches, India waits. And when the dust settles, India steps forward, composed, consistent, and in control. In a world where every nation wants to win the next 10 minutes, India is planning for the next 50 years. That is its quiet rebellion against the chaos of modern geopolitics and its most formidable weapon. Strategic patience doesn't look glamorous, but it's the difference between a nation that reacts to the world and a nation that remakes it. Is this conversation helpful so far? Self-reliance is no longer just an economic strategy for India. It is a national philosophy, a mindset that has evolved from centuries of dependence to decades of discipline. The rise of India's self-reliance marks a profound shift in how global power is measured. In an age where alliances are fragile and supply chains can be weaponized, true strength lies in the ability to stand independently. India understands this better than most. Its journey from being seen as a developing nation to an emerging powerhouse has been built not through noise or confrontation, but through quiet, deliberate creation, the silent power of self-belief translated into policy, innovation, and resilience. For years, India's role in the world economy was defined by its potential rather than its presence. It was a market to be tapped, a workforce to be outsourced, a democracy to be studied. But that narrative is changing. The call for Atmanirbhar Bharat, a self-reliant India, is not just about manufacturing or trade, it's about mindset. It's about taking control of destiny, about producing not just goods, but confidence. When global systems fracture, nations that can sustain themselves rise higher, and India is positioning itself exactly for that future. America's next big mistake may come from underestimating this quiet revolution. For decades, the US has been accustomed to being the world's supplier of technology, defense, and direction, but India no longer seeks to import its strength, it's building it at home. From defense production to digital infrastructure, India's focus is on reducing reliance on external powers while increasing global influence. The more America tries to use dependency as leverage, the more India turns it into motivation. Every restriction, every withheld technology, every delayed deal only deepens India's determination to innovate its way out of dependency. Look at technology. Once dominated by Western platforms, now increasingly driven by Indian alternatives. Digital payment systems, data sovereignty, AI development, and indigenous startups are redefining what global competition looks like. India is not copying Silicon Valley. It is creating its own ecosystem, one that understands the rhythm of its people and the scale of its ambition. Silent power isn't about announcements or declarations. It's about results that speak louder than rhetoric. Even in defense, a sector long dependent on foreign suppliers, India's transformation is striking. Indigenous projects like the Tejas fighter jet, the Agni missile program, and the push for domestic naval production all tell the same story: control over capability. When a nation can defend itself with its own hands, it commands respect beyond borders. America's overreach in global defense policies may have accelerated this realization. That reliance, however convenient, is vulnerability disguised as partnership. Self-reliance has also reshaped India's diplomacy. No longer does it seek validation or alignment, it seeks respect. It can engage the US without submission, collaborate with Russia without dependence, and trade with China without fear. That balance is the truest mark of modern power, the ability to choose cooperation, not out of need, but from strength. This rise of silent power is India's most understated advantage. While others project influence through military bases or financial dominance, India projects it through trust, stability, and capacity. It doesn't need to declare itself a superpower. It is becoming one by default, through competence rather than confrontation. The world is beginning to realize that the quietest revolutions are often the most irreversible. And in that silence, India's self-reliance is turning into something extraordinary, a power that doesn't shout but cannot be ignored. Pressure is often described as the true test of strength, but for India, it has become something far more profound, a source of transformation. Nations reveal their character not in moments of comfort, but in moments of constraint. And every time India has been tested by political isolation, economic challenges, or global skepticism, it has turned adversity into acceleration. The ability to transform pressure into power is not a tactic, it is India's inherited instinct, refined through centuries of survival, adaptation, and quiet resilience. For much of modern history, India has faced external and internal pressures that could have fractured a lesser nation. Economic sanctions, foreign dependency, political turbulence, and even social divisions all have tested its endurance. Yet, each challenge became a catalyst for evolution. When others tried to contain it, India redefined itself. When global systems sought to dictate its path, it found new routes. Pressure did not weaken India, it forged it. Every external attempt to limit India's reach only taught it how to expand differently, through innovation, diplomacy, and patience. America's next big mistake may be assuming that pressure will still work as leverage against India. For decades, Western powers used economic dependency and diplomatic influence as tools to steer developing nations. But that playbook is outdated. Today's India no longer responds to pressure with compliance, it responds with creativity. Whether it's sanctions, trade restrictions, or geopolitical arm twisting, every act of external control now produces the opposite of its intent. Pressure becomes propulsion. Obstacles become opportunity. Consider technology and energy independence, two areas where India has faced immense global pressure. When denied access to critical technologies, India built its own. When cornered by oil diplomacy, it invested in solar power and alternative energy. When criticized for its domestic reforms, it doubled down on long-term transformation. In each case, what was meant to limit India only liberated it further. The lesson is simple but powerful. When you apply pressure to a nation that has mastered endurance, you don't create submission, you create strength. This transformation is not limited to policy, it's cultural. The Indian psyche carries an unusual relationship with challenge, from ancient civilizations that thrived under invasion to modern entrepreneurs who rise from scarcity. There is a pattern of adaptation that defines the nation's identity. India doesn't just survive pressure, it learns from it, absorbs it, and redirects it. Every crisis becomes a classroom, every setback a strategy. That ability to turn constraint into capability is what makes India unstoppable. On the global stage, this is becoming increasingly visible. As America and other powers grapple with the volatility of their own overreach, India is demonstrating what composure under pressure looks like. Its diplomacy remains balanced, its economy steady, its innovation forward-looking. The same conditions that might break other nations become India's training ground. And in that quiet transformation lies the blueprint of future leadership, one that is not born from dominance but from resilience. Power gained through pressure is the purest kind because it cannot be taken away, it is earned. India's calm response to external demands, its refusal to bend under diplomatic strain, and its persistence in the face of global bias are not signs of defiance, they are signs of maturity. The world is beginning to see that pressure, when placed upon India, doesn't diminish its potential, it defines it. Each new test becomes another spark in the fire of its unstoppable rise. So when we look at the world today, loud, hurried, and full of nations chasing the illusion of dominance, India stands apart not because it shouts louder, but because it listens longer. The story unfolding before us isn't one of confrontation, but of transformation. America's next big mistake will not be the fall of a giant, but the rise of a new kind of greatness, the kind that doesn't imitate but innovates, that doesn't demand power but earns it. India has learned from the arrogance of history, survived the pressure of progress, and mastered the rhythm of restraint. Each miscalculation by those who underestimate it becomes another chapter in its ascent. The world once looked to the West for leadership. Soon, it will look to the East for wisdom. And when that moment arrives, when the dust of ego and overreach settles, the world will realize something simple yet profound. India never needed to conquer to become powerful. It only needed to be patient enough to let others reveal their flaws and wise enough to turn every challenge into its own opportunity. That is not the story of a rising nation. It is the story of an unstoppable one,